Hi, this is Sarah with The Holy Mess, and in this video, I'm going to share with you my experience as an adult who has been diagnosed with sucrose intolerance. If you have been diagnosed with sucrose intolerance or you suspect that maybe you have sucrose intolerance, this video is for you. Now, if you are watching this and you are a regular viewer of The Holy Mess, I just want to let you know this is not my typical topic. Normally, I write about weight loss. I've lost 130 pounds. I write about Weight Watchers. I write about faith topics. I share about Christian weight loss. So I apologize. This video isn't for you, but you're more than welcome to watch if you're just curious, or if you've had some digestive issues and you think it might be possible that you have sucrose intolerance. I'm going to be sharing my story. And I've been sharing for the last few years on my Facebook page and my Instagram about my digestive struggles, and so many of you have been praying for me. You've been encouraging me, and I just want to say thank you so much. Earlier this year, or I guess it was the end of last year, I received this diagnosis. It's relatively rare. So the reason why I am recording this video is that I have struggled to find information. I still feel like I don't have much information. And so this video is for anyone else who might be diagnosed with this, just to get some information out there. I want to stress that I am not a doctor, I'm not a nurse, I'm not a medical professional. This is me sharing my story and my experience. So please don't hold me to any type of medical advice. I'm simply sharing what has happened for me, what is working for me, and what I am doing moving forward. So what is sucrose intolerance? Sucrose intolerance is when the body is not making the enzymes to digest sucrose, which is a type of sugar. And people who don't digest sucrose well also don't digest starch well. So there are two known types of sucrose intolerance in my understanding, and one is genetic and one is acquired. So genetic it's called CSID. It's congenital sucrase isomaltase deficiency, CSID. And then there's also adults who, it appears, I think we're still learning about this, but appear to have the sucrose intolerance, but they weren't born with it and they haven't had it their whole lives. And I think that's where I fall. I fall into an acquired sucrose intolerance, probably because of some other digestive issues that I've had going on, which I'm going to share about a little bit later in the video. So CSID is typically diagnosed in kids sometime in childhood, and these are kiddos who are very, very sick because they're not properly digesting. Many times they're not gaining weight, and when they're diagnosed, they are diagnosed typically through a small intestine biopsy. For reasons I do not fully understand, these small intestine biopsies are almost never done on adults, but they're very easy to get. Not easy to get, it is a medical procedure, but for children. And when children are diagnosed with this, then they begin treatment, and so do adults, and the treatment is twofold. One is diet. A diet that's very low in sucrose and starch, and then there is a medication. It's not available everywhere, but it is available in the United States, called Sucraid. So again, there's genetic and acquired, and it seems like there's a bit of controversy about what is genetic, what is acquired. Some people believe that adults can only be diagnosed with acquired. Some people and some doctors believe that you can be diagnosed with CSID as an adult, especially adults who've always had digestive problems. Maybe they've just never really known why, but they continue to struggle with digestive problems. Maybe they had a milder case that was never diagnosed in childhood, and then they're diagnosed as adults. That is not my experience. My digestion was completely fine up until a couple years ago when I started having some other problems that eventually led to this diagnosis. So I truly believe that mine is acquired, and because of that, I do believe that I won't always have it. I think that I can heal my digestion and get back to a little bit more regular life. Maybe I'll always have some issues with it, but I actually believe I will fully be healed. I'm a person of faith, and I believe that God is going to heal me of this. But for the time being, I need to follow the protocol. So that is sucrose intolerance. And as I said, it's when the body in the small intestine either has never made or stops making the enzymes that are needed to break down sucrose, which is a type of sugar, and along with that starch. So what kind of symptoms do you have? Well, it varies by person, but for me, that was bloating, stomach pain, nausea, and constipation. A lot of people, especially in the classic CSID, have just really terrible diarrhea, but for me, it was constipation. So here's my story, a little bit more of my story. My story started a couple years ago, very suddenly, with a really bad case of heartburn, massively bad, like way better than any other heartburn I'd ever had. I went to my doctor, who gave me heartburn medication and then prescription heartburn medication, sent me to the GI doctor, and they started me on PPIs, which are protein pump inhibitors. Didn't really help. Did an upper GI, a scope to look inside, and saw some irritation, but didn't really see anything wrong. And then that continued a cascade of symptoms that have just gotten worse and worse and worse over the last couple of years, to the point where last fall I was so sick I could not get out of bed. I was having constant bloating, constant stomach pain, constant nausea, just the bloating. Like I looked like I'm 120 pounds and I looked like I was like 9 months pregnant. I just was so very sick, very constipated. It seemed like everything I ate irritated me, or I couldn't figure out, what was irritating me, just constant. What we now believe maybe is going on is that the proton pump inhibitors, because they cut down on your stomach acid so much, that maybe for me, that led to a case of SIBO, which is small intestine bacterial overgrowth. Not sure. I never was. I did have a test, which SIBO is tested a couple different ways, but primarily through a breath test, a hydrogen breath test. Mine was negative. So either I didn't have SIBO or I did have it, and by that point we'd eradicated it, and so my test came back negative. Because I had all the symptoms of SIBO, I was treated multiple times. I took Candibactin AR and BR, which is an over-the-counter. You can get it on Amazon, although I don't recommend taking it unless you have a medical professional who's guiding you. I took Augmentin, Xifaxan, Flagyl, Neomycin, and can't say that I really saw too much difference in any of those. The first time I took Candibactin, AR and BR, I did see some symptom improvement. And around that time, I actually started a vegan diet and saw some symptom improvement for that. I felt great. Still was having symptoms, especially the bloating, fatigue, but not to the point that I couldn't get out of bed. It did seem to help. It seemed to help everything except the heartburn for a while. So now we're kind of wondering if maybe the Candibactin AR/BR did help, if I did have SIBO during that time. But then after the heartburn never got better though during all of that. After about 6 months of the vegan diet, that was when I started getting even worse. It was almost like it was worse than it was before. So now, again, we don't really know, but we suspect, did I have SIBO come back, because it tends to come back? And did that eventually lead to the sucrose intolerance? Because I had the bacterial overgrowth, it slowed down everything in my digestion, extreme constipation. Did that lead to damage to the brush border of the small intestine, which stopped my body from producing the enzymes the way that it should? Since then, I have also been diagnosed with fructose intolerance, which was tested on a breath test, and doesn't surprise me because as I have done food challenges, I could tell that I was sensitive to fructose. And it's not unusual for people who have sucrose intolerance, children and adults, to have some of these other intolerances because all of these enzymes are made in the small intestine in the same place. So if you have one, it kind of makes sense that you might have another. So all disaccharides need to be looked at as you are evaluating your diet. So that was what happened with me. As I was just getting sicker and sicker, at one point I went to the emergency room. They couldn't really find anything wrong, but when they did a CAT scan, did see that I had a lot of constipation. I was really, really backed up. And so I started treating that fairly aggressively and have seen some improvement there. During this whole 2 years, I had so many tests. I had an upper GI scope, I had a colonoscopy, I had a gastric emptying study, lots and lots of medication, prescription medication, over-the-counter medication, supplements. I probably tried 10 to 12 different elimination diets. I worked with the registered dietitian. I was on a low FODMAP diet for over 6 months. I saw 2 different functional medicine doctors at their clinics. As I've said, multiple rounds of treatment for SIBO. I can't really say that any of that I saw too much improvement. I would see maybe a little bit of improvement here and there, with the exception of the vegan diet. I did see improvement with that and the first round of Canabactin ARBR. I never felt great, but I definitely saw improvement. But when I got to the point that I was so sick that I couldn't get out of bed, nothing was working. No diet, no supplement. I just was, the only thing I would do was lay on the couch with a heating pad and be miserable. I mean, I could barely work. I didn't go to church for a month. I didn't take my kids anywhere. I was just in agony. It was extremely difficult. So around that time, my GI doctor had mentioned to me, and she had said, well, you know, we could do this test for sucrose intolerance. It's just a breath test. It's a very easy test. You can do it at home. So I was like, okay, sure, why not? She kind of even said, like, I don't think you have it, but, you know, we can test for it anyway. So I was like, okay, fine. Took this test. After all these tests, you know, she thought it was going to be negative. I thought it was going to be negative. I was laying on the couch one day with my heating pad, just laying there miserable. My doctor's office calls and she says, Sarah, you're not going to believe this, but you tested positive for sucrose intolerance, and I think that could be what is going on with you. And she said, you know, this is so rare. The company, the rep from the company who gives us the test actually came to the office to tell me. And this rep said, you had a patient who tested positive for sucrose intolerance. Can you believe it? And my doctor said, I bet it's Sarah. And she was right, because I'd been so sick and we tested everything and we just couldn't figure out what was going on. So what she told me at the time is, I said, oh, well, then obviously I need to be on a special diet. And she's like, well, yeah, but actually there's a medication for it. There's an enzyme that you take. And she kind of hinted at, like, then you can eat normally, which I found out is completely not true. And I don't know if I just misunderstood what she was saying. She has since told me that she doesn't really have patients with this diagnosis. I'm pretty much, you know, the only one right now. So maybe some of it is just lack of understanding. But if you're someone who's watching this video right now and you've had digestive issues with no relief, it certainly doesn't hurt to test for this. The test is actually free because the company that creates Sucraid, the medication, provides the test for free. So there's really no harm in testing it. You drink a solution and you breathe into this thing and then you send it off. So it's a very harmless test. You can get sick from the test if you do have sucrose intolerance because you're ingesting a lot of sugar, but you know, it's worth it to find out if you have it. So that was how I got the diagnosis. Then the next step is hopefully getting Sucraid. Sucraid is phenomenally expensive. It is extremely expensive. In fact, one month's worth of Sucraid costs more than what we paid for our car. So getting your insurance to pay for it is probably going to be a challenge. If you have insurance, most insurance does deny it, at least the first time, if not the first few times, just because it is so expensive and they want proof that you really do need it. So it took several tries, it took several letters and phone calls from my doctor, but my insurance did cover it. My copay is very high, and so the company that makes Sucraid, and it's only produced by one pharmacy in the United States called US Bioservices, does have a plan to help you cover either the cost of the whole medication or the copay because it is so expensive. So I am able to get it because of that, because of both my insurance paying for it and their patient help program. That is how I am financially able to afford the medication. The medication is testy, Sucraid. It has to be kept cold and it has to be kept dark. So it's shipped overnight and it comes in a cold pack. And it also, once you open it, it only stays good for 28 days. So it's definitely a volatile, it's kind of a sensitive medication, not volatile like it's gonna explode, but it's a sensitive medication. So you have to keep it in a bag that's dark and you have to keep it cold. It will keep for a while though if you don't open the bottle, so that is helpful. And the prescription gives you plenty because they give you enough for meals and snacks, and like, you know, I don't snack a whole lot, so that gives me enough that I have enough to last the month, which is really helpful. So that is the medication. What happened with me is that I started taking the medication, but I still wasn't really getting better. And for some people, like as soon as they start taking the medication, it's just instantaneous. They feel so much better. That was not my experience. First of all, I needed a lot more understanding about how the diet works along with the medication. And second, that was the time when I started realizing that I probably had other disaccharides going on. And so that was part of the picture for me too. So let's talk about the diet and what that means. Just because you have Sucraid, if you're someone who has sucrose intolerance, doesn't mean you get to go and just eat whatever you want. That was kind of the first impression that I was given, and that is so far from the truth. So sucrose is in a lot of different foods naturally. It's in fruits, it's in vegetables, it's in starches, or it's in some foods with starches that naturally have sugar, and then of course it's added to a lot of foods. So any foods that have a relatively high amount of sucrose, I would never be eating those foods right now. The medication helps cover if I just get very small or trace amounts, but every person has a different amount that their body can tolerate. So your body might still be making some of the enzymes that help you digest sucrose, but not a lot, and that's going to vary by every person. Some people, their body, it's like completely not making any at all. So the going general understanding is that you can tolerate about 2 grams of sucrose without Sucraid. That's really low. That's not very much at all. Just even some fruits, like half a serving, might have that much sucrose or lots more. Even things like spaghetti sauce or something like that. Not to mention, you know, we're not even talking about like eating some kind of like piece of candy or something. This is just like natural foods. So most of us who have this diagnosis follow a keto type diet or like a paleo diet. Not because we're trying to get into ketosis, that's not in any way the goal, but just because those are naturally foods that are very low. If it's very low in carbohydrates, it's also going to be very low in sugar. So if you're just being diagnosed or you're suspecting that you have this, what I recommend is going down to a diet of literally just meat and eggs and salt for a period of time, and then very gradually adding other foods to see what your tolerance is. For some people, that amount of sucrose is going to be a trace. I mean, I'm not kidding you, like a trace amount. And then other people can have a little bit more. And then most of us fall, you know, somewhere in the middle with that. What a lot of people find is that, especially if they can get Sucraid, or in other countries it's invertase, and there's also a medication called Starch Whey that some people order from a company called Intolerant. I haven't had a lot of luck with Starch Whey, but I know many people love it. So I had to do that. I had to go down to a diet of just meat and eggs and then very gradually add foods. And I'm also working with a dietitian. It took me a while to find a dietitian who knows this condition, but they are out there. And she has helped me tremendously in understanding how to go about testing some of these different foods. I will say, you know, it's often recommended for digestive issues, a low FODMAP diet. You can eat a low FODMAP diet and still be high in sucrose or starch, and so there's some benefit to that, but you're probably not going to see enough benefit to make it worth it. So the ketogenic type diet, go down to meat and eggs and salt only. Things like black pepper actually has starch in it, different spice mixes. So you really need to test spices too. Also, even supplements, things like vitamins, even things like, Tylenol and stuff. Usually it's not enough to cause too much of a concern, but those can all have starches in them because they use them to bind the medications together. I haven't found it too much of an issue in like prescription medications or even things like Tylenol and Motrin, but some of your more supplements can definitely have, like, I've seen like rice hulls and different things that really probably could be potentially too much for you. So starch, this is a toughie. A lot of us who have sucrose intolerance or CSID have a very low tolerance for starch. So eliminating all starches to begin with is important, and then figuring out what you can consume. Many people can handle starches a little bit better if they're fried. So some people can handle like a little bit of French fries. So far what I've tested for myself has been very low. Like I had one, we measured it, the dietitian and I, on a food scale to figure it out. One tiny baby potato, very small, I could have, but when I tried a medium baby potato, I had symptoms. Like I tried rice and I could have, literally after like 2 bites, I started having symptoms. So for me right now, my tolerance to starch is very low, probably even lower than my tolerance for sucrose, especially, now that I have Sucraid. I think I just haven't tested it, but I probably could have some of that sugar, and I will eventually test it with the Sucraid, but right now I just, like, for me, it's more important to have some of those basic foods that I know I can have. So, I eat vegetables. I mostly eat meat and vegetables. And so I kind of like to save my sucrose and my starch for the vegetables. So, right now I'm eating like cauliflower, broccoli, arugula, spinach, Brussels sprouts, butternut squash. I have to be a little careful of that one, but I have it in small servings, acorn squash in small servings. I would rather have my sucrose and my starches in some of those foods that I feel like are really healthy and filling than to try to test it on like a cookie or something. So that's where I'm at. As I mentioned, I also have fructose intolerance, which has made this really quite tricky. And that's why when I got the Sucraid, I still wasn't getting better because I didn't know at the time. And so once I eliminated the fructose, then I started to get better. And once I really eliminated the starch, then I started to get better. So eliminating the sucrose and the fructose and the starch, oh, and lactose. I did also test like borderline lactose intolerant, but you can also take Lactaid for that. That is what has led to me doing much better. Now, my digestion is not normal. The other thing that went along with all of this for me is that when I got really sick, I started having tons of nutritional deficiencies that showed up on my blood work because, my body wasn't digesting half of what I was eating, and I just had all this constipation. So I started supplementing with a doctor's guidance on the vitamins and things that I was deficient in. So as I've started supplementing those, it took a while, it took months, but I'm feeling much, much better. I still have fatigue. I get definitely more tired than the average Joe, much more tired than I was before I had this diagnosis. I nap several times a day. I'm really blessed that I have a diet where my schedule is, or a job where my schedule is somewhat flexible. I got 5 kids, so I still got stuff going on, and I'm a pastor's wife, but I have some flexibility, and sometimes I just have to, whether I can or not. It's like, well, mom's laying down on the couch, so it is what it is, because that's how I survive. I still have bloating. It's definitely better, much, much better than it was, but I do have bloating, even when I follow a diet that is, basically like a ketogenic diet. I can't really tolerate artificial sweeteners for reasons just I guess just a lot of people don't. And because my digestion is so sensitive, that's what we think anyway. So that does make it hard. Technically, people who have sucrose intolerance should be able to digest fructose and dextrose. So those can be purchased on Amazon. You can cook with them. They react a little bit differently from like a baking standpoint. I just haven't experimented with a lot of that yet, but I do know that it's possible. And treating the constipation has been really big. I'm, like I said, pretty aggressive about that. With over-the-counter, I have tried several prescription medications that just didn't really help me much, but they are available, so that's something that you can talk to your doctor about. But it is just really important to keep that train moving, because first of all, you can get impacted to the point that you need surgery, and second of all, that really can damage your intestines. And so that's why I think for me that was part of what's going on. So I treat that with different like magnesium and other over-the-counter medications. I don't think I want to get into all that on this video, but you're welcome to message me. I'll put my contact information below if you need help with that. I have been encouraged by doctors that you're not going to hurt yourself if you take more than the over-the-counter that's recommended on the bottle. So that made me feel better. I do take Digest Gold, and I do think that helps. That's kind of a top-of-the-line digestive enzymes that are pills that you swallow. I do still use the starch whey. I haven't had great success. I know a lot of people just love it. I haven't found that it's helped me a ton, but when you're not sure, you go ahead and take it. There is a, it's called Fructaid. There is a digestive enzyme on Amazon called Fructaid for people who have fructose intolerance. I do think that's helping. Again, sometimes it can be kind of hard to tell, because even when I follow the diet, sometimes I have symptoms. And when I do eat certain foods, I keep my try to keep my servings fairly low. Sometimes I overdo it on the peanut butter, which unfortunately has sucrose and starch, but oh, I love peanut butter. That's one I can't tolerate very much of nuts at all, unfortunately, sadly. So that's what I'm doing. I'm healing. I want to give anyone who has been diagnosed with this or who thinks they have it, especially those of you who have been diagnosed as adults, I just want to give you hope that I believe that you can heal from this. I fully believe that I will not always have this. I believe I can heal from this and get better. If you're watching this video years from now, you're welcome to message me and ask me, and I'll tell you what happened with me. Certainly, if you think you might have it, ask for a breath test. Your doctor might not even know about it. Your regular doctor probably doesn't, know it's possible. Even a lot of GI doctors don't know that the test is available, but the test is available from the company that makes Sucraid, and it's free. So, and it's very non-invasive. So you're really not out much for testing for it. I do think there probably are a lot more of us out there, and it just is relatively, not understood. And if you have it, I can't encourage you enough. Keep fighting for the Sucraid. If you can get the Sucraid, at least to try it. Not everybody tolerates Sucraid, but it's at least worth a try. Those of you in other countries, to find if you can get a compound pharmacy to make you invertase, and then just understanding the diet. Even doctors were not explaining to me well about the diet, but the diet is very, very important with this diagnosis, and going down to a diet that completely eliminates all possibilities of what could be triggering you. Eat that for a while, calm the system down, and then you can gradually, start to build up some of these things. So that's my experience with sucrose intolerance with an adult diagnosed with sucrose intolerance who I believe has acquired sucrose intolerance. And if you have questions, like I said, I don't necessarily know the answers. I'm sharing my experience as someone who has it, just as a way to get some information out there, because it feels like there's so little information for those of us who do have it. You're welcome to contact me. There are some great Facebook groups. The only Facebook groups I found were for CSID, but thankfully those people and those parents have been so warm and generous and so willing to let those of us who perhaps have the acquired come on into the group and share our stories. I'm Sarah with The Holy Mess. Thanks for watching. Bye.